What is going on, guys? Welcome back. In this video today we're going to learn how to rapidly build data applications in Python using Dash. So let us get right into it. Alright, now before we get started with the actual tutorial, we're going to take a look at the two examples that we're going to code in this video today, so you know what's coming and you also see what Dash is kind of about. It's about interactive data applications, so applications where we work with data and we have these visualization elements that are usually interactive. For example, here we have a very simple one. We have the California housing dataset loaded in a table. We also have this simple pagination feature down here, so we can look at the individual rows. And what we can do is we can select a specific feature and it automatically plots a histogram. That is a very simple example of what you can do with Dash. A more complex example is this one here. This is the second one that we're going to code in this video today, an interactive stock candlestick chart visualization tool. All we have to do here is we have to provide a ticker symbol like MSFT for Microsoft. Then we can select the date here. So for example, let's go with the 1st of January 2021 and let's go up until July 2023, 1st of July, and then submit. And what I get as a result here is a candlestick chart for this specific time frame. And I can also zoom into it. I can work with it interactively here. I can move around. And this is another example. You can also find additional examples here in the dash-example-index.herokuapp.com website. You will find a link in the description down below. These are just a couple of examples that they have provided on the website here. And the interesting thing is that for each example, you have the example itself, so the resulting application on the left side, and on the right side you have the code that produces it. And you can see it's not a lot of code to create visualizations like this one, so this is super interesting, and this is what we're going to learn about in this video today. Alright, so we're going to take a look at Dash in this video today, and we're going to learn how to build data applications in Python by using it. Now before that, of course, we're going to install a couple of dependencies, and you also need to make sure you have a data set that you're going to work with in this video today if you want to follow along. I personally use the California housing dataset here. I have it exported as a CSV file. All I did to get this file was export it from scikit-learn. If you want to have the exact same data frame, basically I just typed from sklearn, and of course you need scikit-learn installed for this, .datasets import fetch California housing. Then I said df is equal to fetch California housing as frame equals true, dot frame to get the data frame. And then I said df to CSV, and I called it housing.csv. Let's call this one housing2csv. And I said, I think index is equal to none or false. I'm not sure. And then if I run this here, I should get the exact same data set again. So this is the same file. As you can see, this is how you can get the exact same data set if you want to. But of course, you can use any data set you like. So let me just delete this here. And we're going to install a couple of packages first. So open up your command line and type pip or pip3 install. We're going to install pandas to work with the data. We're going to install plotly for obvious reasons because Dash is basically using plotly. And we're going to install dash. So pandas, plotly, dash. These are the components. These are the packages that we need for this video today. And once you have them installed, we can start with the imports. We're going to say import pandas spd. Import plotly.express spx, which is a common alias, and we're going to say from dash import. And the interesting thing is what we do with Dash is we create applications and we run the applications. And the interesting thing is Dash is actually based on Flask. So what you do in order to create a Dash application is you say from lowercase dash import uppercase dash, which is the same as for Flask, where you say from Flask import Flask. Then you create the application, then you do a dash or an app.run on the Dash application instance. So we're going to say from dash import dash. We're going to import also HTML to work with HTML components. We're going to import the Dash table. We're going to import DCC. We're going to import callback, and then also output and input. And we're going to talk about these imports when we use them. So the first thing you need to do is you need to load the data set into your program. So we need to say here df equals pd read CSV or whatever format you're using, and then we're going to load it from housing.csv in this case. Again, you can also, if you want to load it directly from scikit-learn, you don't have to load it from a file, but we're going to use for this first example with the table and the histograms, we're going to use a data frame. So we're going to have a pandas data frame with the data. And then we can already start by creating the app. So we can say app equals dash like this. And then we can define the user interface by saying app.layout is equal to, and then we pass here a list of components. Now, the interesting thing is we can basically use HTML here without having to write HTML code. So for example, one thing I can do is I can say html.div, and then I can say children to set the content. I can say children equals, this is a wrong import here. I can say children equals to dashboard, for example. And then I can say if underscore underscore name underscore underscore equals underscore underscore main underscore underscore app.run debug equals true. And this already, actually we need two equal signs here. This already gives me an application where I have a simple dashboard here in a div. So this is how we can define our user interface by using HTML components without having to write actual HTML code. And the first thing that you want to have, or that we want to have after this div with the dashboard text, is we want to have a table showing the data of our data frame. So we want to say here dash table dot data table, and we're going to pass here the data is going to be equal to df to dictionary, and we want to do this by record. So one dictionary, one dict object will be one entry in the data frame. This is just the, or records actually with an S, so it's plural. This is the format that we're going to provide to the table, and the table is then going to have our records as individual rows in the table. And we can also set a page size. We can say that the page size is 20, which means 20 rows will be displayed per page. Now I can already run this, and you're going to see that this gives me an interactive table showing my data. So I can use the pagination down here to look at the different rows. But there isn't any real interactive functionality yet. So let us add more components. Let's say we want to have another div box, html.div or div container. Here now we're going to pass a list. So we're going to have in this div other components. First of all, I want to have a label, and this label will have the text select feature, and it will be followed by a dcc.dropdown. So this is going to be a dropdown object or a dropdown element, and I will give it an ID. The reason I assign an ID to this dropdown is because I want to be able to refer to it in a function. Because in order to add something interactive here, in order to add any logic that is executed when something happens, we need to make sure that we have identifiers for the individual elements. So DCC dropdown, the ID for this one will be called feature dropdown, and the options here are going to be the following. I'm going to have a list of options, and they're going to be modeled as a dictionary. The label is going to be equal to column or to call, and the value is also going to be equal to call. For what is call? For call in df columns. So I'm going to iterate over all the columns of the data frame, and for each column I'm going to add an option where the label and the value of the column is the column name, or of the option is the column name. And the default here should be, so the value should be df columns index 0, so the first column name. And in the end here, I also want to have a graph dcc.graph, and this graph should have the ID histogram. So notice I have an ID for the dropdown and I have an ID for the graph, because these are the two things that I want to have an interaction with here. Now, in order to add any functionality, because if I just run this now, there is no functionality for these two elements. I can select a feature and I already see a graph, but I don't have any functionality here. Nothing is plotted. If I want to have an interaction here, what I have to do is I have to create a so-called callback function, where I have to define a so-called callback function. And for this, I'm going to say here app.callback, and I'm going to define two things inside of this callback here. The first one is going to be the output. So what is going to get the resulting value? What is going to receive the return value of this function? This is going to be the element with the ID histogram, in particular the figure of this element. And the input to that function is going to be taken from the element feature dropdown. And in particular, we're interested in the value of this element. So the value, the input for that function is the value of feature dropdown. The output is going to be the figure of histogram. And then I just have to define the function here, update histogram. And I can say that the parameter, let's call it selected feature, is going to this is basically now the value of the feature dropdown. So whatever we select in the feature dropdown will be passed here as a parameter, selected feature. And what I can do now is I can say I want to create a figure, px histogram, and I want to use the data frame as an input here. And I'm interested in the selected feature as the x variable. And then I also want to say update layout. I want to set a couple of things here. First of all, the title should be an f string saying histogram of selected feature. Then I also want to have an x-axis title, which is going to be selected feature. And then I also want to have a y-axis title, which is going to be equal to frequency. And the final thing is we want to return that figure. So we create a figure, we return the figure, and that is going to be taken as the new value for the figure of the histogram element of this one here. So this already should be enough to get this working. So this is actually the full code of the first example. We have still this data frame explorer here, if you want to call it that. And down here now we can already see a histogram. If I select now a different feature, you can see the histogram is updated. So this is how easily you can do something like this. Now let us move on to the second example, which is the interactive candlestick chart visualization tool. Here we're going to be able to input a ticker symbol and a start and end date. Then we're going to click a button and then it's going to plot the stock price over time as a candlestick chart. And we want to have all of this in dark mode, so we're going to add some styling options, color, background color, padding, and so on, so that we can also see how to do that in Dash. But for this, we're going to need one additional Python package, which is necessary to get the data from the Yahoo Finance API. And this package is called yfinance. So pip or pip3 install yfinance. And once you have this, what we're going to do is we're going to say import yfinance as yf, import plotly.graphObjects as go, which is also a common alias. And then from Dash, again, we're going to import Dash, we're going to import DCC, HTML, input, output, and also we're going to import state, which is going to be used like input and output, but it's not a trigger. I think that's basically it. And then we're going to start again by saying app is equal to Dash, and then we're going to define the layout. So we're going to say app.layout. And this time we're going to say that the overall container is going to be a div box and everything else will be defined as children of that div box, so that we see a different way of doing this as well. So we're going to say here that html.div is going to be the overall container, and we're going to pass here a style dictionary right away. So I'm going to say style is equal to a dictionary where the key background color points to a value hashtag 111111. So this is a very dark gray. The color is going to be equal to white. So it's going to be hashtag FFFFFF. And the padding in here is going to be equal to 20 pixels. And then we're going to say that the children of this div box are going to be equal to a list. And this list will now contain more UI elements. So for example, HTML H1 heading of size 1 or heading of category 1, the largest heading. We're going to say stock candlestick chart tool. And then we're going to say style is equal to a dictionary again. Here we're going to say now text align is going to be set to center. And we're going to say that the color of this is also going to be white. There you go. All right. So that is just a heading. Now, in addition to that, we're going to add now a text input. We're going to add 2 date pickers and a button. And then we're also going to connect some functionality with those. So we're going to say here, inside of the div, I want to have another div. And this div shall contain now, first of all, a label, HTML label, which is going to be enter stock ticker symbol. And this is also, of course, going to have the same style. It's going to be color white. I think you can also pass white as a keyword here, but I'm just going to go with the hex code. And then we're going to add here the dcc.input element, which is going to be a text input. And of course, here we need to also have an ID because we're going to use this in code. So I'm going to call this here ticker-input. The type of this input is going to be text, same as input type text in HTML. And the default value, if you want to set one, could be something like Apple, for example. So AAPL, but of course, choose whatever you want. And the style here, again, is going to be background color will be set to a lighter gray. So we're going to say here 333333. And then the color is going to be set to white again. And I think it's also enough if you have just 3s and Fs, you can also just say FFF, 3 times is enough, but I'm going to do it like this. All right, so that's the input element, and then we're also going to assign a style to the div itself. We're going to say here that the style of the div is going to be a dictionary, and we're going to say padding here is equal to 10 pixels. Now you can adjust the styling if you want to. I just wanted to show you how you can do that as well. For each element that you add, you can also add a dictionary with style containing background color, text alignment, float, padding, margin, and so on. All the HTML or CSS stuff that you know about. And this is now one UI element. In addition to that, we're going to also add now another div. Now maybe let me just copy paste this here and just replace the UI elements, because now we're going to have still a label, which is going to say select start date. It's still going to have a white color. And instead of input now, we're going to say date picker single. So date picker single is going to allow us to choose a date. It's going to have the ID now. Let's call this start date picker. Input type is obviously going to be or actually we don't have an input type here because this is a date picker, not an input. So this is going to be the ID, and the default date here we can set by setting the date attribute. The date attribute in this case, let's go with 2022, 1st of January. This is going to be the default value. And then we can also, we don't need really a styling for this one. So basically we just have here a div, a label, a date picker, and the same padding as before. Now I can copy paste this, and all I have to change now is I can say select end date, and the ID for this one is the end date picker. And maybe we want to have a different default date, like 2023, for example. And the last thing we need to make this functional is we need to say that we want to have a button. So we're going to have another div box here. Maybe also let's copy this one here. Now we're going to say here, or actually we don't need this time a label because we're just going to have the button in here. So I'm going to say div, and then I'm going to say html.button, and this button will have the text submit. The ID of this will be the submit button. We're going to set the end clicks to 0 in the beginning. And then we're going to say that the style of this button is going to have, again, a background color of, now let's give it a gray that's a little bit lighter. So hashtag 444444. And the color is still going to be white. And that is basically it. Now, the important thing, again, is that you have an ID for the button, an ID for the date pickers here, and also an ID for the ticker input, because these are the things that we're going to then use. Now, we need one more element here, and also with an ID. Actually, let me add a text align center here. I want to reproduce the example from the preview, which is why I'm double checking constantly with my second screen to make sure that I'm using the same layout options here. The last element that we need to add here is also the graph. And in this graph, we want to have the candlestick chart. So we need to be able to target the graph. So we need to assign an ID to it again. So we're going to say here, HTML div. In here, we're going to have, this is going to be, we're going to add here a style. First of all, we're going to have a container ID. So we're going to call this chart container. Because we want to disable it. We want to make it invisible if there is no plot. We don't want to show an empty candlestick chart in the beginning. And I'm going to say here that the style in the beginning is going to be visible, or visibility is going to be equal to hidden. So it's going to be not displayed in the beginning. And inside of this div, we want to have the child element, the dcc.graph, and this is going to have the ID candlestick-chart. And the style of this one here is going to be a dictionary saying that the background color is going to be a very dark gray. All right, so if I didn't forget anything, that should be it. This is now our layout. This is our full UI, and the only thing we need to add now is again a function that actually does the plotting, that loads the data based on the input, based on the ticker symbol, based on the dates, that visualizes it properly, and that handles all the values. So we're going to define down here app.callback. Let me add a couple of lines here so that we can have this more centered here. App.callback, and now we're going to define a couple of things. First of all, I want to have two return values. I want to have, first of all, the visibility, or first of all, the figure, the candlestick chart, and second of all, the visibility of the container. So I want to be able to control these two things based on this function. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to define a list here. First of all, output, and I want to get from candlestick, or I want to set from candlestick chart the figure attribute, which is the same as before. For the histogram, we target the figure element or the figure attribute of the candlestick chart, and the second output will be the visibility of the container. So it will be the chart container, and of that chart, the style. So we're going to target the style attribute, and there we're going to set the visibility to hidden. Or we're going to set it to visible if we do return a feature or a figure. So this is the outputs. These are the outputs. Now we also want to have an input. Now the difference between an input and a state is that an input triggers the function. So we're going to say here an input is going to be, or the input is going to be the submit button. And in particular, the nClicks attribute, which is going to change when we click the button. It's going to increase. And in addition to all of that, we also want to have three states. So we're going to say state. The first one I want to look at is the ticker input, in particular, the value of the ticker input element. The second one is the start date picker. From it, I want to have the date attribute. And here now, I want to have the same for the end date picker. Now I misclicked. And these are going to be my input states. So I have the output. This is what I'm going to return, what the function is going to return. It's going to return two values, the figure for the candlestick chart element and the style for the container, which is going to toggle or control the visibility. It's going to be triggered by the submit button, by nClicks, basically. By changing nClicks, this is going to be the input, and then the state is going to be, or we're going to also get three values here from ticker input, start date picker, and end date picker. So we want to define now a function update chart. It's going to take nClicks as a first input, so this is the first input here. The second one is going to be the ticker, or the ticker symbol. Then we're going to have a start date, and then we're going to have an end date. So these are the inputs to my function. So the states are also inputs. And basically all we're going to do here is we're going to say if nClicks is larger than 0. So basically when a click has happened, we're going to say df is equal to yf download. We're going to download the ticker symbol. We're going to say start date is equal, or start is equal to start date. End is equal to end date. This is going to load the financial data for this time frame. And now all we need to do is we need to say figure is equal to go figure. The data is going to be equal to the following. And here now we're going to pass a list. This list is going to contain go.candlestick. Go is graph objects from Plotly. X is equal to df index. Open is equal to df open. So X is obviously the date. Open is open, close is close, high is high, low is low. These are just the fields that the data frame has and that a candlestick needs. So candlestick shows you all the information in one candlestick. So open, then close is close, then high is going to be equal to df high, and low is going to be equal to df low. And that is our plot basically. And then all we need to do is we need to update the axes and so on. So figure update layout. We're going to set a couple of things. The title is going to be equal to candlestick chart off ticker. X-axis title is going to be equal to date. Y-axis title is going to be equal to price in USD. And X-axis range slider visible shall be equal to false. And the template for the plot itself is going to be equal to plotly dark. So this is automatically going to add a dark mode or use a dark mode for our figure. And then we're going to say here return figure and visibility as a dictionary here, visibility visible. And if the end clicks is not above 0, we're going to just return go figure, so an empty figure, and visibility hidden. So visibility hidden. So if we don't click the button, it's going to return this. All right, so that is our callback function. Now all we need to do here is we need to call all of this. We need to run all of this. So I'm going to say if name is equal to main, app run debug equals true, and hopefully there are not going to be any errors. If yes, we need to fix them, but we should end up with a tool that looks like the one that I showed you in the beginning. So let's just go and plot. There you go. We have a candlestick chart of Apple. Let's go and use a different time frame and a different stock. Submit. There you go. It's updated. We can see Microsoft now. I can also zoom in. And this is another example of what you can do. And as I said, you can also visit the website that you will find a link to in the description down below with all the examples from Dash itself, where you can see the code right beside the application. And you can see how easy it is to build interactive data applications with Dash and Python. So that's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it and hope you learned something. If so, let me know by hitting a like button and leaving a comment in the comment section down below. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell to not miss a single future video for free. Other than that, thank you much for watching. See you in the next video and bye.